Software Engineering Radio, episode 81, interview with Erich Gamma. Hello listeners, welcome to the Christmas edition of Software Engineering Radio. This one is another interview episode with somebody who we've tried to get in front of the microphone for a long time, and it never worked for the usual reasons. I didn't have time, he didn't have time. We met at a conference and, well, everybody had other stuff to do, but we now finally managed to do it at UPSLA 2007 in, where was it? In Montreal, Canada. Well, and we talked about what you would expect, about patterns, about JUnit, about Eclipse, about Jazz. Should be an interesting interview. But before we get to the content, since this is the last show of 2007, I just want to say thank you for listening to SE Radio, for supporting us with your positive comments, with your feedback, and also with your donations. We have been running this experiment, where we tried to get donations at a level that is enough for us to be able to get some of the stuff financed we want to finance. And actually the donations were quite okay. I have to find out exactly what the numbers are, and I will tell you early next year when the 2007 year is really completely over. But it looks good. I'm not yet sure whether it's enough so we can do it without sponsoring the long term. We've also been given a significant amount of money from a company, and I'll reveal details in the new year. We have to say thank you somehow, and we'll do that. We'll put some stuff on the website and maybe mention the company a couple of times. It's important for you to understand that I didn't ask them. It's not like I asked for sponsoring. They just said, hey, we like SE Radio. Here is the money. Do something sensible. And I really think we should thank them. Anyway, so I will give you more details beginning of next year. This was just a quick heads up. And since we're talking about money things, you might have noticed on the SE Radio website, we have created another button basically on the title page on the left. So instead of giving us a one-time donation, you can also subscribe to SE Radio with a monthly $3 subscription. And the nice thing about subscriptions is that it gives us, I should say, a way of planning. So if you subscribe, then we know that we probably get such and such amounts of money per month, and that means we can plan ahead. So you might consider subscribing to the regular donations. There is another thing I want to talk about. I have mentioned this in the past before, and that is that we were thinking about a little SE Radio conference. We are tentatively calling it the SE Radio Get Together 2008. And, the institutionalized coffee break, we were thinking about a open space conference. So on the SE Radio website, left side, more or less at the top, you'll see a nice picture of a campfire. It says something about SE Radio Get Together. Please click there. We have a couple of questions where we need to know your answers about how much, when, how long, which language, and whether you're interested in general. So please go ahead. Go there, answer the questions. This will allow us to plan and decide whether we're doing this or whether we're not going to do this, to be able to plan. Okay, that was enough of metadata. Let's get to today's episode. As I said, it's an interview with Erich Gamma. And, have fun listening to it. Have a nice Christmas tomorrow and a good 2008. Talk to you in the new year. Welcome, Erich, to the show.
Glad to be here.
So, Erich, why don't you start by introducing yourself to our audience?
So, my name is Erich Gamma. I'm a distinguished engineer working from Zürich. We have a lab in Zürich. We have a small team there, and our current work focus is now both Eclipse and Jazz, as you might cover later in the interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll cover these different things. Okay. So before we go there, something I always wanted to know, where does your name Gamma come from? It's actually quite geeky, so it's a good fit. So is that a typical name in Switzerland?
It's not a release attribute. It's really a real name. So it's very popular in the central part of Switzerland. So there's a village where everybody is almost called Gamma.
Okay.
So it's not that special.
Okay.
So let's first talk a little bit about patterns. Everybody knows that you've written this Golf book together with the other three guys. So if you look back at the influence the Golf book had, the patterns book had, are you happy with how it went? What do you think?
How can I not be happy?
Well, you never know.
What I'm amazed of, looking at what has changed since you wrote the book, right? We wrote the book before internet, before Java, before XML, before whatever, right? Which has proven to me that people are still interested. It has some timeless material in there, right? Yeah. Objects, how they talk to each other, that's still in there. So that's kind of, to me, the most amazing thing. However, there is also a lesson in there, right? And which is a little bit of frustration. Maybe you cannot learn patterns from a book. And, but the alternative is to not have a book. So a choice, right? Between having a book and another book. So, of course, it has exceeded our wildest dreams.
Right.
How we see that.
So how many do you roughly sell these days still? Is it still in the charts, kind of?
I still get a check. So once a year, I think we are in the order of 350,000 and we still sell 1,000 per month. So something like that. So
that's really impressive.
And many companies now they hand out the book to their employees when they start the first day of working. So it's
cool. Good idea, actually, to hand out the book. So what do you think about the patterns community today? What do you think? How has it developed? What's your opinion in general about this stuff?
So I first of all think the community that has built around patterns is by itself a success, right? So some inner circle had this idea of patterns, and they started early on. In order to make it a success, you build a community, and I think this was very effective. And I think it's really a compliment also to this whole movement is that it's still alive, right? So I was surprised here at Uppsala, there is still a tiny plop, or how is it called?
A mini plop, I guess.
Mini plop. Yeah. So the whole model of communication, interaction, shepherding, workshops, it's still alive. And I think there is now a whole new generation and has in there and is energizing the movement. So I'm impressed that it's still alive. Of course, the scope has broadened. Yeah. As you see also when you look at the Google for books on patterns, right? You will be impressed what the scope is these days. But I think it's a very successful community, and the fresh minds, I think they keep it alive. Yeah. And it's a successful example also of rolling over a community, right? So some people stepped out, but new people came in and pushed it forward. So I think it's great.
So would you agree to the notion that, let's say, the basic design patterns are all documented with your book and the POSA book and maybe 2 or 3 other books or patterns, and now things have to become more domain-specific or architecture-specific and in order to find more patterns?
I think that's definitely what the past you also see, right, with the coverage nowadays. Kind of each new technology comes with new experience, comes with new lessons learned, and you want to reuse that experience. That's why you should capture it in patterns, and patterns are a good way to do that. Yeah. That's definitely one path. I wouldn't say that the whole pattern wisdom is covered by the design patterns book, but it covers a good share. Also covers some less important ones, right? So I have my top 10 list of patterns which I like in the book, and there are also ones which I don't like that much. Singleton is one which I think have overblown in the book, which kind of almost it's a bad design. It's not objects, right? You have one well-known thing to go to.
Would you put dependency injection in there if you did the book again today?
So actually, we had some reflection 2 years ago if we would modernize the book, because people are right. They complain the book needs to be modernized. No doubt about that. Yeah. And we talked about what patterns we will put in, right? There is definitely no type object that comes in, right? That you have some representation that you can get a little bit meta level representation. Yep. Null object is one of them.
Classical,
which you would add. And dependency injection is something which I think is also along the path of pattern thinking or design pattern thinking, right? Design patterns is a lot about abstract coupling. Yep. How we call it determining if you reference another type via an interface or an abstract class. So it depends injection makes the decoupling even looser, right? By even extracting it out the source code and having it kind of injected somewhere.
Yeah, making the connection somebody else's responsibility.
Right? As late as possible. Yeah. So, and from that, I think I would have to think about how to write it up well, but I've seen Martin Fowler did an attempt, so I think that's definitely something.
The reason why I asked was because I have heard several people that said all the creational patterns in the Golf book should basically go away. We can all do it with dependency injection. And I thought, well, that's not what I would say.
Now, each pattern is about a trade-off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was a lesson also when you wrote the book, right? Initially, we thought each pattern is a panacea.
Yep.
Then until the reviewer said, wait, you're wrong, right? With each pattern comes trade-offs. The obvious one is additional interactions, additional complexity.
Yep.
And the same comes with depends injection, right? It has a price. It has a understanding problem. You have to understand how this fits together, debugging issues.
Right.
And it really depends. If a single factory method is doing my job for object creation, then I'm fine, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah. So you haven't been very active in the last couple of years in the patterns community. I haven't seen you on a patterns conference. Was that intended, or did you just move on and had other stuff to do?
No, I think it was not intended, but it's just, I still actively use patterns.
Sure.
I'm interested in patterns. I read the plot proceedings, which you have edited one of them, I guess. So
the plot D5
the
book.
plot D5. So I track it and I'm interested in it. And also I use it when I write about it. Remember that when I wrote the Eclipse book, I have one section on it.
Good point.
Patterns, which I like to think in patterns and I have high interest, but it's just making active contributions. This has gone down. So just the focus on my work.
It's different.
It's not intentional. It's not a loss of interest.
Although I've seen your name on the editor board or advisory board or program committee of the new patterns journal that's about to come out from the Hillside Group. So I thought that was good.
That's good. And that's what I also thought is a great opportunity to get back, kind of to not lose touch completely.
Although Utah joked that there are only people on the board who haven't done anything in patterns in the last 5 years, but we maybe shouldn't say that.
Maybe that's a pattern for the board. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next thing you're known for, which is JUnit. And you just told me a couple of minutes ago that today or this week is more or less the 10-year anniversary of JUnit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how JUnit came about?
Okay, it's kind of a fun story. So exactly 10 years ago, there was UPSLA in Atlanta, and Kent Beck was living in Zürich for 2 years with his family, and we flew together with Austrian Airlines to Atlanta, and we had 10 hours time, and we not only like to talk together, Kent and I, we also enjoy programming together. And so that's as obvious. It's a great opportunity. He had this idea about his testing framework, JUnit, and I said, okay, I can teach you Java. If you
JUnit because Smalltalk.
Yes, it was a Smalltalk unit. That was Kent's original idea. So and I said, okay, I teach you Java. We do it together and we explain it together and we talk patterns together. And it really happened during the flight. From Zurich to Atlanta, we wrote the initial version of the framework. We were drinking lots of Almdudler. And from then on, it has started, and that's 10 years ago.
Yeah. So would you think that many people say that JUnit is probably your most pervasive contribution to the field of software in general? Would you agree, or would you rather think that's maybe the pattern stuff? I didn't make this up, so I just...
Just if I look at my sweat indication factor, right? There's way more sweat in design patterns.
That's
JUnit
true.
was really, it's a small, fun little piece.
But isn't that the nice thing about it? It's small, it's easy to understand, and it had this huge impact.
No, that's another community success, right?
Yes.
Pattern was a community success. JUnit is also a community success. And, of course, Kent, did a really great job at that. And I was glad I could contribute to that as well.
So what is necessary to make something a community success? I mean, if we go on to Eclipse, it's again a community success.
Yes.
So what is the secret sauce here?
The secret sauce here is you have to get something to a level which is interesting, right? It has to be kind of a present, but it has to have enough interesting stuff in there that others look at it. Okay, it's not enough to talk about something. It's not enough to talk about concepts. It has to be runnable, usable, and then I guess you can start building a community around it. And of course, it needs not only code. I guess the test infected paper we wrote was important, which showed programmers actually it's uncool to not have tests. Right? So I don't say the other way around. I wouldn't say the other way. It's cool to have tests, but it's uncool to not have tests.
Yeah, that's maybe the thing, to have this shift in mindset from testing as something, a chore that you have to do and that's kind of boring and dull, to something that is the driver for the design of your system.
Absolutely. And I can imagine I want to go back, right, to the before test aware programming or test sensitive to that. Intense programming.
It's interesting. You should say this word because I mean test-driven development is about writing the test first. You said something different. You said test-aware or test-sensitive. Are you actually like one of these, let's say, religious fanatics that say you always have to write the test first, or are you a bit more pragmatic there to say the important is you have the coverage? It doesn't matter if you do it first or second.
Right. I think the important thing is you have to test, and sometimes it's good to write them in advance. I think it's almost always good to have in advance. But I think I'm pragmatic now. I'm happy when I have tests, and when it happened, I not that much bother.
Well, the argument is always if you write tests, then it makes your software testable, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. You think about dependencies, you think about setting up the objects so that you can test them. That's all good things, and I will not downplay that.
Sure. No.
See, I went through, maybe I got the best test education, right? With pair programming with Kent.
Yes.
And trust me, when I start to want to implement some code feature, in the framework without writing a test first, he would have pulled away the keyboard from immediately. Yeah. So I went through that, and I think it's a great experience. Yeah. And no doubt about that.
I also guess that if you want to introduce testing into a community, you have to be radical in some sense and always do it in a certain way. If you say, like, Ken would pull the keyboard away, you have to be really consequent. And then once it's in you can then make the compromises, I guess.
Absolutely. I think Kent's mindset is, which I sort of appreciate, if something is good, turn the volume to the maximum.
Yes.
And that's how you get it. And then make no compromise.
Right. Okay, let's look at another thing you've been involved in, obviously Eclipse. We can talk quite a bit about Eclipse. What would you say is the most important aspect of Eclipse, maybe except from the obvious, which is the community? So back again. So what's the important technical aspect of Eclipse that can make it so successful as it is these days?
I think it's maybe two things, right? First of all, from the beginning, we had this kind of growth path in mind, how we want to extend Eclipse. Fred Brooks made this some point on when you design a system, keep the growth path of the system in mind. I think that captured it well. When we did Eclipse, from the beginning, we said everything should be plugins. Yep. But you also understood it needs to have a growth path, because if you're successful, there will be tons of plugins. Yep. So we had this kind of modularity plus scalability in mind from the beginning. Mm-hmm. That's why I did this declarative plugin dependencies model with extension points, which lazy load dependencies, things like that. So that's the key thing, right? Keeping the growth path of Eclipse in mind. And modularity is a very important lesson.
In other words, maybe it has an architecture that is able to cope with unexpected or unplanned extensions.
I would say it's planned for growth in component, but unplanned extension smells to me too much like uncontrolled extension. Yeah. And uncontrolled extension, it turns out to often be a problem because it's maintainability wise. And that's another thing which was important to Eclipse. It's not only the growth path, but also the stability we kept in mind. Because if you want to get growth, right, you have to get some stable foundation that things can grow on top. Yeah. As much as I hate as a developer the API stability and constraints you have there, right? Yeah. It's like you're getting handcuffed, and you have to build layers and layers of compatibility. I think we have 5 different preference mechanisms, and I don't know, actually, if you would make a test on me, I'm sure I would not be able to tell you which one is implemented on top of each other one. But that's the price you pay, right? For growing a community, you have to have a growth modularity story and a stability story. Plus, what I forgot, we had also the tool story, right? And that was
What do you mean by the tool story?
It's good if you buy architecture, you allow that you can have a growth path, that you can have additional plugins, but you should also make it easy to write new plugins. Sure. Right? So that's why we have not only with Eclipse comes not only a nice Java development tool, but also comes a tool set for writing plugins, managing plugins, and so on, right? So it's kind of these 3 things which gave the snowball effect. Mm-hmm. You enable the growth path, things happen, and then more and more plugins come into place, more and more people know about plugins, and then you have the skills. Yeah. And that was really key. And I really stopped counting, right? I have no numbers.
Plugins?
How many plugins there are for Eclipse or how many things. It's just has escaped me a couple of years ago.
I always like to call Eclipse an operating system for tool development.
That was at the beginning of the vision until we got abused for normal application development.
Like RCP or what?
RCP rich client, right?
Okay, why do you call this abused?
No, in software development, when it comes to ship something, right, one key element for us is focus. Focus, right? So, and we know, yes, we could have built a general framework for building applications, and we said, no, we focus on the tools platform. That's what we want, right? And then from the outside came the request. Can you actually, they've done that. I say abused, kind of. So it was really pressured, right? Because they have started to hack Eclipse, and And then so that's not good. And actually we see potential, and we were kind of surprised about the generality of the framework, which really, given our focus, wasn't anticipated.
And now it even moves to the server, right?
And now it even moves to the server, and so it's a OSGI and the extensibility model everywhere. And as we will see in Jazz, right, we leverage this extensibility also on the server.
Yeah. So, you said that stability is obviously a key component of making an architecture future-proof, so people can trust that what they do now isn't going to be, like rubbish tomorrow. So what do you do technically, and later we discuss about the process, what do you do technically to keep the Eclipse core and the existing plugins, APIs stable?
Okay, what we invest into right now is API tools. Mm-hmm. We always had kind of tools which just compared APIs so that we know whether we have broken something. Yeah. Right. So, we have tools that give us a diff, from API stuff, and we're improving that right now. We also have, I guess since Eclipse 3, we have support that when you're not using API.
Code garbage collection kind of. It tells you what's never used.
No. You want to also educate your clients. Yeah. What they should program against.
Right.
Okay. So that's why you make explicit what is API or not. Yeah. And with tools we have in Eclipse, since Eclipse 3, you can say, and see whether you use a method which is not part of API.
The other way around. Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of the other thing, which helps us now, because if our community doesn't understand the value of APIs and they're programming it internally, don't give us feedback when they have to use internal stuff, and ask, because that's a sign we should expose more. And of course, intentionally, we start with a small set of exposed APIs because we know the commitment is serious. So that's why you ought to do it on demand by request.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's briefly look at the development process. You have given
tons of talks and shown the same slide so many times. So which slide are you referring to?
I don't remember all of them specifically. I was just getting at the point that you as a team have realized that the way you develop software is probably not the worst way, because you're able to deliver stable, reliable stuff in regular time intervals. So that's why you've started documenting and, quote, formalizing the Eclipse Way, which is the process of developing Eclipse itself. So can you talk a little bit about that? What can people learn from Eclipse development? And I guess, except test-driven development, I assume that's part of it.
If you look at the Eclipse practices we use, and we say we are part of the Eclipse Way, many of them are established agile practices, right? Continuous integration, continuous testing, iterative development. We haven't innovated there at all, right? Yep. So we tried out what worked for us. We keep doing. So we tried pair programming. Didn't stick. We sometimes use it, but I would say, the value I see is the set of practices we use and how we evolved it over time. By retrospectives, how we improved it. And I think what people can learn from that is more also how agility can scale to a distributed team. And again, the key element here is we work with components, assign a team to component, and then agree overall across component on a release rhythm to iterative development. And each iteration has not only be iterative, but also have added value. So iterative plus incremental, the obvious buzzword. And that enables feedback. Right. And then the next key lesson is the transparency, right? So transparency is a good thing for software development.
And that's not just towards the outside. It's also transparency within the teams. Everybody knows everybody does.
The key point is that at some point when you start to use the same communication infrastructure inside as outside, right? Because then it helps you in the inside also, but it also enables outside to give you feedback.
I think another key topic is the fact that you're actually developing a development tool so you can eat your own dog food. You can use the tool to develop the tool. So people have to use what they did before.
Right. Eat your own dog food, drink your own champagne, or eat your own chocolate. Whatever. Yes. That's a benefit, right? That's something which others don't have as a luxury, right? Others have applied the Eclipse Way as well. And the feedback was, many of the practices apply easily, how we do approval, sign-offs, whatever. That works well. There's, of course, the eat your own dog food, which is kind of special because we build our own tool.
Right.
The other thing is kind of some platform-specific practices that we call build to last, the API focus, which doesn't apply to all the others. But so I've seen experience reports from others using Eclipse Way, and it showed me that it's a good set of agile practices, and it's worthwhile to mimic. And
it's publicly documented, so we can put a link into the show notes, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's draw an analogy. in the same way, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but anyway. So in the same way as at some point you and Kent decided to codify or build a tool that helps you do the test-driven development, which would be JUnit, you also now took the Eclipse Way and codified that into a tool that helps you do distributed agile development, which leads us to jazz. Although you don't like jazz, I was told.
I don't like jazz music. I like the jazz project a lot. So in a way, I think jazz again was driven by different influences, and obviously the Eclipse influence was big, right? We learned a lot from Eclipse. First of all, I mentioned this transparency. I mentioned the practices we do and how we can actually get more tool support with these practices. So exactly, you want to kind of support the Eclipse Way by jazz as a tool set. However, it's obvious we don't want to limit jazz just to the Eclipse Way, right? So that's why the way we do that is kind of you have some process awareness in the kernel, and you can plug in different processes.
The Eclipse process framework thing, right?
No, the Eclipse process framework we use mostly for the describing the process, right? It's a good framework for describing the tasks, the input you have, and what you should consider when you do that, what are practices for that. I really like practices kind of as the key things, not too much the task. So the Eclipse process framework fits into it for us, we call it the static process description, right? Just if you want to read up. But we are more interested from a tool side into enacted one, right? If you look at what our team does, right? There's so many steps to have to be aware of when you deliver a change to the team, right? So you have to copyright stuff. Sometimes you need a review. And this is the thing which you want to enact, right? Which is kind of more interesting because this gives more value, right? Because reading, not everybody likes to read, but if you get guided and get assisting to do the boring, tedious steps, that was kind of the idea. And of course, you don't want to constrain this and limit this to the Eclipse Way. That's why I said the process is pluggable. You can plug in the Eclipse Way. You can plug in other process which can influence how jazz behaves depending on the process.
Can you give us like an insight into a number of, let's say, cool, innovative features that jazz provides? I mean, if people saw the demo or some of the videos, we'll put links into it. They can see live how things work. But can you give us like 3 or 4 really nice, convincing things that maybe other tools can't do?
The challenge here is when it comes to team development and team support, it's not like with IDEs where it's just a single feature like refactoring or quick fixes, right? Or support for fixing problems. It's many little things that help you to be more effective. So that's why I can't name you just 1 or 2 features. I can just more say, what are our key focus areas we have, right? So key themes are, whatever we do, we want to put the team in the center, right? What does a team, how can you make the team more effective? We can do that now by having the tools, know about the team structure, know about the team roles, know about team responsibilities and team process. So the team first thing shows us a key theme, which I think is a really distinctive feature, right? You can see what happens in a team. You can RSS feed from a team. Teams can have their own continuous build and they're associated with the team.
Cool.
When you get invited into a team, right, you get set up and each team can also customize the process. Very important, right? That's kind of real team focusedness. We understand not every team is the same, right? That was a key lesson also from Eclipse, right? The team in Ottawa that doing SWT is totally different than we in Zürich when we did Java development.
So then there are kind of 2 levels in Jazz. One is the team as the smallest entity, except for the developer himself. And then there is maybe this bigger thing, which is a collection of teams that collaborate on the
teams.
Teams
very
of teams.
Yes. Exactly. So that's then the next thing, right? We have teams and the tools know teams and the relationship and the artifacts and everything. And then you have mechanisms to scale up to teams of teams. And that's, I guess, brings us into the other point where a key thing of Jazz is you have tightly integrated tools. Right. We have, tools which allow us to answer questions which are hard to answer if you have them isolate or point tools. Like, is the fix in the build or things like that, which you can just read information from the build system, from the bug tracking system.
You can collect stuff manually, but you have it in one place.
So and the third thing is, given that we have all these tools working together, right? We get information about progress and artifacts that you wouldn't get otherwise because we can give you then a health information, project information, which then again helps on the transparency, right? So it's kind of, Summers always says 3 things. Our team is in the center, then the process awareness, that the tool really has process baked in at the bottom, because now process, really, if you don't have it in the bottom, it's hard to bolt it on top unless you try to use aspect and whatever technologies, which we know are very powerful, but have other trade-offs. And that's why we want to have it in the core. And then the third one is we collect data about how the team is doing, make it available, which improves transparency by health report.
One feature I saw at some point was quite nice, that if you fix a bug in a certain environment, you can make the environment persistent with the bug. So if somebody else wants to work with that bug, he can basically get the workspace that's completely set up.
Absolutely. So that's
all the environment management crap that you have to go through seems to be gone.
I think, if you look at, I'm great with today's development tools. I feel I'm great with programming, right? I have refactoring, quick fixes. All the tedious stuff is gone. But when I leave my sandbox, and I start to interact with the team, then it's where the boring stuff comes again, right? Yes. And that's what you want to address with Jazz. Like when you want to reproduce the state of your workspace with the failure in the build, right? We just have this information captured. You have a snapshot, and you can say, okay, from this snapshot, create my workspace which matches that.
Yeah. So is Jazz only for distributed teams, or is there also?
Absolutely not. No, the way I would say it, no, Jazz is actually scales up to distributed teams. We use it ourselves since 11 months. We do all our Jazz stuff with Jazz. But I would start to use it, actually, create a one developer. I would start to use Jazz these days, because you want to collaborate, you want to exchange stuff, you want to track stuff. You will soon have a need for a build, you want to share code. So created in one, I would start to use Jazz. Now, Jazz can really scale down.
Yeah. So what do I have to do to use Jazz? Is it commercial? Is it open source?
So,
or is it released yet?
We have a beta program, so you can register on jazz.net, get a registration. We want to have a more gradual approach now to make it available. It's not open source. It's right now there will be a commercial product next year. The name, of course, I don't might.
So Jazz is the code name. It's not
Jazz is kind of more the name of the technology.
Okay.
Right. The product, there will be products building on top of the Jazz. Same as the Eclipse, right? Eclipse is a platform. You will see products building on top of it, and we will bundle the first thing, which will have the collaboration support, build, source control, bug tracking.
You've got your own version control system in it.
We have different integration approaches. As I said, tight integration is very important for us. So that's why you have three, actually, that's a sensitive area. We have three areas, three kind of integrations, right? We have our own, which gives it a tight and deep integration. Then we have kind of what we call more coexistence. So when you have subversion, right? So not everybody wants to jump on our own. We understand that. Yeah. So we have kind of either you can import from Subversion, or you can just get a looser integration with Subversion. And the third level is what we call connectors, which gives us a bridge to existing source control system, in particular the ones we have at Rational Event, ClearCase, right? So we have a connector to ClearCase and ideas, and we can synchronize with the motherhood SCM. You can so a team could work in Jazz and synchronize with the motherhood
from time to time, like more releases. So the day-to-day stuff isn't
So this kind of also shows nicely the different integration levels we have to support.
Okay, so let's finish up this Jazz discussion with the question of how it relates to Eclipse. It's obviously built on top of Eclipse, and you already said that it's going to be a commercial product. Will parts of it, or the technology, some of it go to Eclipse?
You're right. No, we leverage Eclipse heavily on both the client and the server, and even our web infrastructure is using the Eclipse modularity OSGI support to get extensibility. We have, of course, leveraged the Eclipse experience we have built on that as well. And the question about open sourcing parts of it, so we have announced we consider open sourcing parts of the infrastructure. It's just kind of for us an interesting challenge, now where to draw the line. Yeah. And given that this challenge is so long, it takes us longer to fix it, but it's still the intent that we open source part of the infrastructure. And where we open source is that's still open, right? Right now we have our community on jazz.net. That's where you have currently, like when we started Eclipse, right? You have news groups, mailing lists, whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's look at 2-3 topics that are not directly related to these things before we close this episode. One is that, you're obviously quite experienced in building tools for languages. You've done the Java IDE part of Eclipse. I think that was your responsibility.
I was the original regional lead of the Java development tools.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And now you've moved on to Eclipse, so other people do that now, I guess. That's what I understand.
No.
I said I moved on to Chess. That's what I wanted to say.
That is not true. No. Eclipse is still dear to our heart, right? So part of the development, some developers have moved Eclipse, but there's lots of horsepower. Still in.
No, I mean, you personally focus on Chess. That's what I mean.
I'm focusing on Chess, but it's not true that all the Eclipse developers
no.
had in my team move off Chess.
No, that's
Eclipse is dear to our heart, and in my lab in Zürich, right, it's about half team is working on Eclipse, and the other half is working on Chess.
Okay, so what I wanted to try to get at was the fact that, we all know this hype on dynamic languages. Well, I shouldn't call it hype. I mean, there is serious stuff in it. So what do you think from a tool builder's perspective? Is it really the static typing that makes tools like Eclipse possible? Or do you think that it's just harder to build good tools for dynamic languages and they will show up at some point?
No, I think it's definitely possible, but the problem is now you have so many different of these dynamic languages. And if you look at all our investment, you have to build into JDT, right? And that sets the bar.
Yes.
And the challenge is really, forget all the other languages, get to the similar bar. And the right thing to do there, I think, is, and that's what you're also already seeing happening now, you build some common infrastructure. Yeah. Like the dynamic language
toolkit or whatever it's called, yeah.
Which exactly tries to do that. And many things you can do for dynamic languages as well. Yeah. Of course, the miss of static type information restricts the amount of searching and things you can do. But
refactoring, you can't do this. If you know of what the type of something is, you can't.
But don't forget, right? Refactoring started in Smalltalk, right?
That is interesting, yes. Yeah, so, good point, yeah.
And there are ways to do it now by looking what's in the message, what's in the catalogs, which messages are available, whatever. So you can do things.
Just a bit more complicated because you don't have this type tag. You actually have to understand what happens.
But I think that's the thing. We should not forget. Smalltalk had a very good IDE. They had refactoring, so it's a dynamic language. Yeah. Self is not a dynamic language. It had a very good IDE. Yeah. So we should not use it as an excuse for not being ambitious when it comes.
That's actually, now that you talk about it, I think that one reason why Self and Smalltalk could do it is because it was a self-reflective system. So the IDE worked basically in the same, let's call it VM for the sake of the argument, as the thing. And for example, in Ruby, as far as I understand, that's not the case. It's not a repository VM-based thing you have. You know what I'm trying to get at? So if you have reflection and can do all these things dynamically, as opposed to just having, let's say, text that you have to analyze, it's probably a different world. Maybe that's interesting to look at some point.
So you need the meta information, right? And of course, in Smalltalk, you just had it there.
You literally ask the object, what can you do?
Exactly. And you have it there. It's at runtime. But you see now refactoring tools for Ruby emerging. I guess there's a post by Dupsla.
Right. Yeah. True.
There's other work. So.
Peter Sommerlad is doing something in that area.
So, and I think we should continue being ambitious even there, and dynamic languages have their place. So it's important, particularly JavaScript, right? It's very important that we have very good JavaScript tools. No doubt.
One thing that you also mentioned in passing was one reason why we have these great tools for Java development is also because for a couple of years, I think this time is over, there was only one language. It was Java. So everybody invested into that. Now that we have maybe a bit more diversity again, maybe there is not as much money going into each of those. So maybe we shouldn't expect tools to be that great anymore.
We were never in the luxury position to work with one technology as software developers. I think so on, right? We always had XML. We always had HTML, whatever. So I think single language, that's 10 years ago, right? So we work with multiple languages, multiple technologies, and it's so important that we get nice integration.
Also between the languages.
Between the languages. When I do refactoring and then I do rename that the Spring description factory reference to a class gets also updated. All the things, which is, I guess, another challenge you have in the tool space, right?
Yeah. There's also some, where I work in this modeling environment where you want to change a model element, and that also changes the name of a class you generated from it, or the other way around, and so this kind of stuff.
That's why also in Eclipse you have invested in refactoring participation to enable such things.
Refactoring framework where you can plug in. Literally. Okay, so let's wrap this episode up with a last question. You've done quite a bit of work in all kinds of areas in software engineering. What is your opinion about what's really the important characteristics a software engineer should have? What should people invest in when they try to make themselves better?
I think a passion for programming
Yeah, that helps.
is always there, right? So that's you should not feel good if you haven't programmed since a while. So I think this passion has to be there, and that's very important, right? Our stuff is moving so fast. So make yourself a test. Have you read a book in the last 2 months? Have you read a new book? Have you learned a new language in the last year? So continuous learning, obviously, is the obvious thing. And I think it's the fact that you have so many open source projects now. You know, there is such a wealth of stuff to learn from. So I think really the best way to learn is now look into open source projects, how they do stuff. You learn the process. You learn interesting, development techniques, whatever. So it's really continuous learning. And
so what was the last language you've looked into, just out of curiosity?
So I bought the book, haven't looked into it. I bought the Erlang book.
Ah, cool. I bought it too and I read it already.
Oh, good. You're ahead of me.
Okay, Erich, thank you very much for being on the show, and well, thanks.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for listening to Software Engineering Radio. If you want to get more information about Software Engineering Radio, or if you want to give us feedback, please go to our website at se-radio.net. You can also contact the team at team@se-radio.net, although we prefer entries in our comments system on the website so other people can see what you think. Software Engineering Radio wants to thank Henning Pauli for the intro and outro music, as well as Libsyn for providing the bandwidth. This episode of SE Radio, as well as all other episodes, is licensed under Creative Commons license. See the Software Engineering Radio website for details.